minutes for other people to get settled in and join. I think the clicks have slowed down. It's great to see so many people this morning. You are here for the public information meeting for the Western Area Power Administration regarding the recommendation to pursue final negotiations regarding Southwest Power Pool Regional Transmission Organization membership. Next slide. It's great to see so many people here this morning. I think we have a great agenda, and thank you for your interest and participation. Looks like we're needing to pull up the presentation here, so I'll wait a minute.
Just 1 second, Claire. This is Parker. I'm bringing up the presentation right now again.
Thank you.
Technical difficulty, but here we go.
Thank you, Parker. That's great. And
No
you can present it as a slideshow, right?
Yep. Just 1 second.
Yeah. Thank you, everybody, for your patience. We're the virtual world is we're excellent. So as I mentioned, we're here for the public information meeting. And can you go to the next slide, Parker?
Yep.
It's great to see you all here. I think we have I'm Claire Douthit. I'm an attorney advisor for WAPA. I'll be the moderator today. We'll have an excellent agenda. We start out with an information session, then we'll take a 5-minute break, and then we will go into a question and answer session. So a couple of housekeeping items on the next slide. Again, the purpose of this information meeting is to explain the recommendation, as well as what the public process is, and provide an opportunity for questions and answers. All participants were muted on entry, and you will be throughout the presentation. At the end, we'll go into the question and answer session, and at the beginning of that, we will explain the process for asking questions. So please hold your verbal questions until the end of the presentation. However, you're welcome to type questions in the chat, and the chat is up at the top of your screen. It says chat at any time during the meeting, and they will go to our facilitator. We will address them during the question and answer session. In your question, please note your name, who you represent, and the slide number, if applicable, in your question. Please note this webinar is being recorded. If you do not want your image or voice recorded, you are welcome to submit questions in the chat rather than having your camera on. A video recording of this webinar will be posted on approximately May 15th. A court reporter is also transcribing this webinar. Next. So the public comment period and process, the Federal Register notice was published on April 28th. And the comment period ends on June 12th. So the comment period is from April 28th to June 12th. When submitting comments, please submit comments in writing by June 12th. Email and postal addresses are included in the Federal Register notice. It's also will be at the end of this presentation. If you made comments before April 28th, you'll need to resubmit them in order for them to be considered. Comments will not be accepted after the close of the comment period. We have a lot of information posted on our website. Most significantly is the recommendation report. And so I direct your attention to that and hope you'll take some time to look through that report as well as other information, including supporting documents for that recommendation report and the recommendation. We will disclose any communications we have regarding the RTO initiative also by posting those on the website. And WAPA personnel will continue to participate in public industry activities and discussions regarding markets, and we will. We need to mute somebody, please. And WAPA will continue to monitor market activities in the industry, of course. Next slide. As I mentioned, today we have the presentation, and then it's followed by a question and answer session at the end. But we also are hosting a second question and answer session on May 25th. That will give you an opportunity to think about the material that was presented today, as well as look at the material online. And if follow-up questions, you can raise those on the 25th. You also could submit, if you're unable to attend that meeting or this meeting, you're able to attend or submit questions in writing. And please provide those no later than May 23rd. And of course, the earlier, the better. It gives us some time to think it through. And a recording of that May 25th webinar will be posted approximately 2 business days after that event. These webinars are not comment sessions. To be considered, all comments must be provided in writing during the comment period, which again is April 28th to June 12th. Next slide. So the comments and the responses to the comments will be posted on WAPA's website after the end of the comment period. And also, following a thorough consideration of all comments, WAPA's administrator will issue a decision that will be posted on WAPA's website. We will not publish a second FRN. So again, the decision will be posted on WAPA's website following a thorough consideration of all comments. So next slide. Now I turn our attention to the opening remarks of our regional managers. First up is Rodney Bailey, who is our Senior Vice President and Colorado River Storage Project Manager. So Rodney, take it away.
Thank you, Claire. Good morning, everyone, and thank you for your interest and participation in today's Public Information Forum. Today's meeting is the culmination of probably tens of thousands of hours of analysis, coordination, and collaboration by many people, including WAPA staff and many of you who are WAPA's customers. And we appreciate the input and collaboration that we've had with you so far. I'm very appreciative to all of you for the hard work and cooperation that has been accomplished to get us to this point here today. Chris Malone held 17 customer meetings and shared and collaborated in the process with WAPA staff and all who has worked very diligently in this effort. I'm very grateful for that. I look forward to hearing your comments through the remainder of this process. And thanks again for joining us here today. We appreciate your time. I'll now turn the time over to Bart Barnhart.
Thank you, Rodney. Much appreciate that. I'd like to add my good morning and welcome to today's public information meeting. As you know from the formal publication of our Federal Register notice on April 28th, WAPA's Rocky Mountain region, the Colorado River Storage Project, and the Upper Great Plains region are engaged in an evaluation to determine whether WAPA should pursue full membership in the Southwest Power Pool's Regional Transmission Organization. You know, the electricity market's changing rapidly, and WAPA knows it's important to evolve along with the industry in order to best serve you, our customers, with those valuable commodities of cost-based hydropower and high voltage transmission. We take this decision very seriously and consider it essential that you have a voice in the decision process. So I hope you've had the opportunity to preview today's presentation, and we look forward to your questions following it. A little later in the presentation, you'll hear from Dave Newmeyer, Vice President of Power Marketing for the Rocky Mountain region, on what led to my recommendation to WAPA's CEO to proceed with this RTO evaluation process from the Rocky Mountain region perspective. So with that in mind, I want to thank you all again for being here. And now I'd like to introduce WAPA's Senior Vice President and Upper Great Plains Regional Manager, Mr. Lloyd Linke. Lloyd, over to you.
Thank you. Thank you, Bart. Good morning, everyone. I'd also like to extend my welcome, and I appreciate you taking the interest in learning more about our potential for becoming part of the Southwest Power Pool expansion of their RTO into the Western Interconnection. Just as the previous regional managers have mentioned, I also appreciate all the work that has gone into this. It is a several month, over a year effort to get to the point where we have gathered enough information to be able to make this recommendation. Along with what Bart had mentioned, I also think that with all the changes taking place in the electrical power industry, that joining an organized market is essential for WAPA to continue to providing value to our customers. The Upper Great Plains is in a little bit different situation than the other two regions. For Upper Great Plains, this will complete our move to SPP that we started in 2015. As you'll hear later in the presentation, that the transmission service for all of the Upper Great Plains transmission facilities, including those in the Western Interconnection, is currently sold under the SPP tariff. Our Eastern Interconnection load and generation is already under the SPP market. So this recommendation would be for us to move forward into final negotiations to add the Upper Great Plains Western Interconnection load and generation to the SPP market. Again, I want to thank everybody for taking the time to show your interest in our recommendation, and I'm looking forward to your thoughts on it. And thank you. And I'll be turning it over to Crystal Dean.
Great. Thank you so much, Lloyd. And again, thank you everyone for being here. Excited to have you on so we can share this recommendation with you. Next slide, please. All right, so what I wanted to do first off is really to go through explicitly what the recommendation is that we are discussing today and that we'll be referencing throughout today's presentation. So on your screen, you'll see it. I'm just going to read through it. The recommendation is for the Western Area Power Administration's Rocky Mountain Region and Colorado River Storage Project Management Center to pursue final negotiations regarding membership in the Southwest Power Pool Regional Transmission Organization and for the Upper Great Plains region to expand its participation. Claire mentioned earlier, but I'll mention again that all the presentations, along with the Federal Register notice, the recommendation report, and some other supporting materials are all on the WAPA's website on your screen, shown here on your screen. Next slide, please. So WAPA published our Federal Register notice on April 28th, seeking membership to the SPP RTO. WAPA is seeking public comments from its customers, stakeholders on the substance of this recommendation. A decision about whether or not to pursue the recommendation will be fully informed by all of the comments received. Once WAPA has made this decision, it will be posted on our website at that same address I showed a minute ago. Next slide. So let's take just a quick look at what we're going to be covering for the rest of our time here this morning. Over the next several slides, I'm going to be reviewing with you some higher level background on who WAPA is and some benefits and considerations of an RTO that really brought WAPA to the recommendation that we're discussing today. After that, I'm going to pass the presentation over to the regions, to the individual regions, so they can provide and discuss with you their specific considerations and implications. If you need to reference the agenda throughout the presentation, it is available again on our website that I described earlier. You can pull it up there in the presentation material. All right, so let's kick this off. Next slide, please. So WAPA markets reliable, cost-based electric power from over 57 hydro plants with an installed capacity of just over 10,500 megawatt hours. We serve over 700 customers, cities, towns, rural electric cooperatives, irrigation districts, public power districts, federal, state agencies, and Native American tribes. We have 5 power marketing areas, 3 balancing authorities, and over 17,000 miles of transmission lines in a 15-state operating footprint. Next slide. So WAPA's mission is to safely provide reliable, cost-based hydropower and transmission to our customers and the communities that we serve. In evaluating markets, we have developed a number of strategies to ensure we are remaining aligned with our mission and our values. Some of those market strategies include protecting and reinforcing the importance of federal hydropower and WAPA's transmission system, determining and managing outcomes that support WAPA's mission, and ensuring that market participation creates value for all of WAPA's customers. We do this by balancing the lowest possible cost with our sound business principles and absolutely recognize that one size does not fit all. We remain committed in our evaluation of the best markets that align to our mission and values and our unique power marketing plans. Next slide. So as a reminder, on your screen here, you'll see the 3 power marketing areas depicted visually that describe the recommendation that we're discussing here today. Those are the CRISP Management Center, the Rocky Mountain region, and our Upper Great Plains regions. Next slide. So let's talk about what is changing in the West that has brought us to this recommendation. Excuse me. The electric industry in the U.S. has undergone and continues to undergo some fundamental shifts in the the impacts to operations, market, and transmission planning. For example, things such as combined impacts of thermal unit retirements, their replacement with natural gas and renewable resources, increases in variable energy resources, persistent drought and changes in our weather dynamics, increased pressures related to state-driven policies, just to name a few. All of these things together create a significantly more dynamic system than what our electricity providers have managed in the past. So because of all of these changes, there's an increasing need for a wide area of situational awareness and control. WAPA and the other prospective RTO West participant members, all who are also our customers, agree that today's status quo is not going to be sustainable for future market operations. Next slide. So on your screen, you'll see in the darker red color, the RTO West footprint should it expand. It should be noted also at the bottom is the entities who are proposed entities of the RTO West initiative. It should also be noted that 5 of those participants operate already both in the eastern and the western interconnections. So the expansion of the RTO West footprint would allow for optimization across the interconnection seams using the already existing rights of those participants across the DC ties. This would allow for an increase in generating resource diversity. This diversity, if leveraged, could support and facilitate system reliability, integration of clean energy resources. It would help manage wholesale electric market price volatility. It would also serve as a hedge against those risks associated with drought and adverse weather impacts. So let's also take a quick look at an RTO as compared against other market operations that are developing in the West. We'll take a first look at the EIM and real-time markets. So when comparing an EIM to an RTO, you can scan down this and it becomes pretty clear that an RTO offers not only the imbalanced market benefits, but also that full resource optimization, operational and reliability benefits as well. It also offers the transmission development that an RTO doesn't offer the transmission development that an RTO provides, and the RTO provides and is far more beneficial than an EIM alone. So as many of you know, and we're looking at the center column and comparing day-ahead markets, SPP and the California ISO are both proposing day-ahead market options. These day-ahead markets are a progressive step from an EIM for sure. However, the options as proposed today lack the full market integration and that future-looking transmission optimization that is offered in the SPP RTO. So overall, we can see that RTOs are perceived by many as the best option for that full package of system operations, markets, and transmission planning in the West, thereby creating the most benefit to its members. So now that we know that it provides the most benefit to the members, what are some of the key features of an RTO? Well, because of an RTO's large operating footprint, coordinated transmission planning, and centralized markets, among other things, they have a greater reliability and economic benefit to its customers. Additionally, resource adequacy is recognized as one of the growing issues in the West due to utilities continuing to rely on their shorter-term bilateral market purchases to supplement generation. The RTO's process for resource adequacy evaluation encourages more efficient coordination of capacity resources and the optimization of transition in a much more holistic, wide approach view. Because of these key features, as well as the ones listed on your screen, and as well as those changing industry conditions that I described earlier, more and more utilities and states are beginning to consider the need for centralization of electric system operations, market, and transmission planning. Next slide. So another thing I wanted to talk about, as we've mentioned here, is the state clean energy policies. These are continuing to develop across the West. I mentioned earlier when discussing changes in the West that there are more and more environmental policies that are developing at the state level. Many of WAPA's customers are being required to comply with these varying degrees of state requirements, including renewable and clean energy policies. As these policies continue to become more stringent, WAPA's customers are likely to need an increased access to generation outside their service territories. In today's bilateral market, this could result in higher transmission wheeling charges due to rate pancaking, as well as overall operational inefficiency, further highlighting the need for resource diversity and centralized markets that exist in the SPP RTO. So again, this recognition across the industry and the states around the benefits and the growing need for that centralized market, it has resulted in DOE and multiple states performing differing levels of analysis on the benefits of an RTO. On your screen here, you see 3 different key studies. All of these studies found that centralized markets provide substantial benefits, and they all took it one step further and said that a full RTO would provide the highest level of benefits as compared to that of an EIM or a day-ahead market. So as a reminder, I want to reference you back to and encourage you to take a look at that recommendation report that's on WAPA's website. The report goes into much more depth of these studies and the benefits that they found. Next slide. So, speaking of studies, in 2022, the RTO West initiative entities contracted with the Brattle Group to perform a production cost analysis on the potential benefits of an RTO expanding in the West. Specifically, they wanted to measure those incremental benefits of moving from the WEIS into the SPP RTO. So this study that's on your screen builds on previous evaluations. It also includes updated modeling assumptions about the participants' footprint, updated generation portfolio numbers, as well as natural gas and updated projected hydrology. So I do just want to note that on your screen is an aggregation of all of the RTO West participants. Each region will go into more depth of detail in the results during their regional slides, but wanted to provide you this high-level look. Next slide. Okay, so we've talked about the benefits of RTOs and centralized markets. So why the SPP RTO? Well, among all of these benefits that I've already described, such as advanced operational tools, consolidating balancing authority footprints, coordinated resource adequacy, increased operational flexibility, advanced mechanisms for transmission planning, development and cost allocation associated with consolidated transmission tariffs, there is another significant benefit that should be highlighted. There have been multiple attempts over the last 20 years or so to develop an RTO from the ground up in the West. These efforts have been onerous and difficult to say the least, and ultimately they have been unsuccessful. The SPP RTO already has these established and proven tools and established governance and tariff provision, as well as SPP's stakeholder-driven governance and structure provisions, really aligning with WAPA and WAPA's priorities and the priorities of our customers. Next slide. So WAPA already has a proven history with SPP. Over many years, WAPA has been listening to and engaging with our customers, our neighboring utilities, and other stakeholders. We have consistently evaluated and, where appropriate, implemented wholesale market solutions that meet the needs of our individual regions. Some examples on your screen include in 2015, UGP joining the SPP RTO in the Eastern Interconnection, as well as putting their Western facilities under the SPP tariff. In 2019, SPP began the Western Reliability Coordinator Services, which now includes 13 transmission operators and 9 BAs in the Western Interconnection. Also in 2019, SPP began their Western Unscheduled Flow Mitigation Program. And in 2021, WAPA's WACM and WOWI BAs both joined the WEIS. All of these activities clearly demonstrates SPP's ability to successfully deploy its services in the West. Knowing this gives WAPA and the other RTO participants a greater degree of confidence in SPP's ability to bring their RTO West services as well. Next slide. So I just want to talk a little bit now about the RTOS market design terms and conditions. And one of the most important aspects of WAPA's membership in the SPP RTO includes the negotiated exemptions known as the federal service exemptions that recognize the unique circumstances of WAPA's federal power marketing programs. The current SPP tariff provides this FSC exemption negotiated by UGP in 2015 when they entered the RTO. Rocky Mountain CRISP have also negotiated the extension of these provisions to their West Side operations. The federal service exemption provides protection from certain market charges to help preserve the value of WAPA's firm electric service deliveries. This means that the FSC ensures WAPA's customers will continue to have the same FES deliveries in the RTO Western construct as they enjoy today. Next slide. So continuing to expand on those market designs, terms, and conditions, I wanted to mention that in summer of 2021, the RTO West entities and SPP finalized an initial terms and conditions document. This was ultimately submitted and approved by the SPP Board of Directors in July of 2021. Due to a little bit of delay, the SPP Board approved extending these terms and conditions through July 1st of 2023. This slide and the next slide both highlight some of the very high-level background bullets of those terms and conditions. Things such as a single order 1000 planning process coordinated with local planning, zonal rate designs where generally each transmission owner would have a zone. Some zones would span both east and west. Point-to-point drive-out revenue assigned to the interconnection's exit side. Separate east and west schedule 11 regional transmission costs, which stays on each side as well. Next slide. Just continuing on with some of those high-level designs, terms, and conditions. Transmission facilities will be defined at 100 kV rather than 60 kV and above. New SPP Western Balancing Authority area, the WACM and WOWI BAs would merge into that single SPP West BA. Minor governance changes, and the Strategic Planning Committee would expand by 2 seats, one for the West Side transmission owner and one for the West Side transmission user. So again, I just touched on a few of these higher level important market design terms and conditions that the board approved. We really encourage you actually to go to SPP's website under the SPP board meeting notes from January 31st to really get a better idea and depth of what these high level terms and conditions and market designs include. Next slide. So I'd like to talk about one more negotiated terms and condition, and that is the DC tie terms and conditions. So the DC tie terms and conditions that you see on your screen will apply to WAPA's Miles City, Stegall, and the DC Sydney ties. These ties would be incorporated in the SPP's transmission system and dispatched by SPP in the integrated marketplace as a single market across the east and west footprint. The incremental market efficiency use provides the revenue to the DC tie owners to offset operational costs. There will be an access charge for the reservations across the tie that sink beyond the DC tie owner zone, as well as some DC tie congestion settlement provisions, all of which will continue to help with the efficiency and the market across the market seams. So now that I provided a very high-level background, what we'll do next is I will pass our presentation over to each of the regions to dive a little bit deeper into their specific regions, considerations, and implications of the SPP RTO recommendation. And first, I'm going to pass it over to Colorado River Storage Project Management Center's Brent Osick.
Thank you, Crystal. Hope you can hear me well enough. So appreciate the excellent background that Crystal provided. And again, we thank you all for your participation today. My name is Brent Ozick. I'm a program and regulatory advisor for the CRISP Management Center. Next slide, please. So each of WAPA's projects is unique, and they were all created by individual legislation. And each project has its own history and needed purposes. To that end, WAPA recognized that one size does not fit all. The unique terms and conditions are needed, especially to reflect the characteristics of the Colorado River Storage Project. The CRISP has a large, sprawling transmission system, but almost no load serving obligation. In fact, most of the CRISP generation is delivered to other balancing authorities. Most utilities don't operate this way. Most utilities have their transmission generation and load contained in one balancing authority. So we're very unique, but that's who we are. That's the way we've operated for decades, and we'll continue to operate that way. So to accommodate the unique nature of the CRISP operations, SPP's board of directors agreed to allow special terms and conditions for CRISP. You can see that there, WAPA CRISP point-to-point transmission service, and FSC, a federal service exemption for WAPA CRISP replacement energy provision. So let's take a little closer look at these provisions, and I'll explain the need behind them. Next slide. So the first bullet concerns point-to-point transmission service. CRISP has long used point-to-point transmission service in delivering its firm electric service obligations. Using point-to-point transmission is a little bit unusual. Most utilities use network service for these types of deliveries. CRISP is unique, again, among utilities. One of the reasons we've used point-to-point service rather than network is that our firm electric service contracts have provisions to allow customers the opportunity to use the transmission system when hydropower is limited either by drought or by operating constraints. So we believe this term and condition is reasonable, as it's consistent with our historic use of point-to-point service. It provides rate stability for the CRISP transmission system, and it's also consistent with the CRISP marketing plan. The second bullet there concerns replacement energy purchases. So Glen Canyon, pictured here, is located right above the Grand Canyon. The operation of Glen Canyon, especially in the 1960s and 70s and 80s, created significant impacts to the Grand Canyon. Water would be released sometimes at full power plant capacity during the days and then nearly turned off at night. This caused some impacts downstream. The Grand Canyon Protection Act of 1992 was passed by Congress, and it moderated the operation of this dam. Operating constraints put on the dam limited the amount of up ramp and down ramp during the day to help preserve the critical resources in the Grand Canyon. However, this loss of operational flexibility reduced the amount of hydropower capacity available to our customers. And the Grand Canyon Protection Act directed WAPA to work with its customers to find alternative solutions to this operational impact. So, working with our customers, we've had power replacement provisions in place since 1998 in response to that congressional direction. So that's 25 years of practice and history that needed to be respected and accommodated. In addition, the last 20 years of drought or aridification, they're calling it now, have made us aware that long-term power replacement purchases may be needed to ensure the long-term value of the CRISP resource. So to that end, we asked the SPP board to allow us to consider long-term purchases essentially longer than a month as equivalent to hydropower. We've had a long history of integrating firming purchases with hydropower, actually have included purchase power as part of our marketing plan. So this provision will allow us to continue to integrate firming power without being exposed to certain market costs, just like hydropower enjoys. So overall, with these two bullets, we're requesting a couple of changes to make the SPP market accommodate CRISP rather than the other way around. Next slide, please. There's a comparison slide of the current state versus the future state that we see potentially in the SPP RTO. So the current state, starting on the left side, CRISP is in the WAC and BA. The CRISP Energy Management and Marketing Office markets, schedules, and bids CRISP resources to meet customer schedules. CRISP resources today are registered as non-dispatchable in the WISE energy amounts market here. And then CRISP today reserves transmission from itself to make from electric service deliveries we buy from ourselves. The future state, no noticeable difference from the service provided today from electric service deliveries. SPP will be the BA rather than WACM, so a big change. The CRISP Energy Management Marketing Office, EMMO, will still market, schedule, and offer CRISP resources to meet customer schedules. CRISP resources will be registered as non-dispatchable in the SPP RTO, and we will continue to reserve CRISP transmission from ourselves to make firm electric service deliveries, but through SPP as the transmission provider. Next slide. Now, there are costs and benefits to any decision, and they'll all need to be considered very carefully. We'll look at some of the risks and we'll look at the potential benefits. There is a concern that if CRISP cannot get approval from FERC for the CRISP terms and condition I addressed in the previous slide, it's critical that we have those. I'll address the transmission rate stability. So using point-to-point transmission service to deliver from electric service is something CRISP has done for decades. We anticipate continuing to use point-to-point service rather than network service. But again, we're asking for a small adjustment to allow CRISP to retain the point-to-point transmission service it purchases on its own system, the revenue from that point-to-point transmission service. This happens today, and we want the same in the future. Without this provision, the CRISP transmission rate will increase exponentially over the long run. And I do mean exponentially without exaggeration. We've calculated that in some scenarios, the CRISP transmission rate will increase by tenfold if we do not have this specific term and condition for point-to-point service. CRISP capacity products, that's a way of saying Western Replacement Power, WRP, and Customer Displacement Power, CDP. These products were created in the mid-1990s and exist today in response to the Grand Canyon Protection Act. We will continue to provide these products, but there are some limitations and constraints of the market that may not allow real-time use, specifically for WRP. But for customers outside the market footprint, there will be no change. But we will continue to work with our customers as we have for the last 25 years to find value in these products as markets continue to evolve, come what may. The initial cost to join, moving down, it's not free to join an RTO. SPP has staff to pay for, implementation costs, and ongoing overhead costs to be reimbursed. They need to be compensated for their efforts. And then transmission congestion rights. With a significant amount of congestion existing on the CRISP system, there is likely to be opportunities to take advantage of transmission congestion rights, the TCRs. These financial rights for congestion are new to us. They exist in an RTO. They don't exist here today in the bilateral world. But there's some risk. Revenue is not guaranteed. If something unusual happens, we could end up paying dollars for these TCRs. But any revenue received from these TCRs, these transmission congestion rights, would be deposited in the CRISP Basin Fund and would be an offsetting revenue to the firm electric service rate, which would benefit all CRISP customers. Next slide, please. This is a cost and benefit summary. Potential benefits are shown in green and potential costs are shown in red. The quality of the estimate is shown in the third column there. Please note on this slide, we don't have included any costs associated with any potential staffing adjustments. The number at the bottom is the one that's interesting. The benefits range from a negative 700K to a positive 2.2 million, mostly dependent upon the amount of energy we're buying from the market as provided by the Brattle Group. And I think in the next slide, we'll take a closer look at the production cost studies provided by the Brattle Group. The next slide, please. We asked the Brattle Group, a consulting group, to provide a study of just a production cost study for CRISP for the normal hydrology and the low hydrology. And as depressing as it may be, it's likely that low hydrology, there on the right side, the low hydrology situation is the one that's most likely. considering our drought history in the past 20 years. If water is normal and our firm electric service obligations are still the same, roughly 5,000 gigawatt hours a year, we'll save about $500,000 a year, $500,000 a year. Power costs are lower in the market due to increased efficiency, so we pay less for firming power. If we have poor water, and again, we still need to deliver that 5,000 gigawatt hours a year, then we save about 3.3 million. Again, power is cheaper because of the general market efficiency. It's still tens of millions of dollars in purchase power in these low water conditions. But overall, it would be $3.3 million less. So instead of spending $40 million in purchase power, we'd spend $37 million in purchase power. And there's some additional wheeling revenue from drive outs. It's about the same in both cases, with CRISP receiving approximately $1.5 million a year in additional transmission revenue because of the energy market deliveries. Next slide, please. As we at CRISP have considered the RTO, we're mindful to ensure value for CRISP. CRISP has worked hard to incorporate customer concerns into terms and conditions to provide the same level of service for our firm electric service customers that they enjoy today. We recognize the need for additional purchase power options to address the extreme drought. The negotiated provisions to be consistent with our marketing plan and also to be consistent with the Energy Policy Act of 2005. And we believe the negotiated terms will preserve and create value for the CRISP resources from which all of our customers can benefit. With that, I'll turn the presentation over to Dave Newmeyer, Vice President of Power Marketing for RMR. Dave.
All right, thank you, Brent. So I'm Dave Newmeyer, VP of Power Marketing for our Rocky Mountain region. Next slide. So there are a number of drivers that have led the Rocky Mountain region to this recommendation. I've got 5 different areas listed here. The first one is sustainable BA operations. So over the years, even over the decades, we've been able to run the BA, the WACM BA, with pretty minimal use of lap resources, as well as a limited amount of purchases from the CRISP project. Over the years, it's become more and more difficult to not lean into the hydro to additional levels. Now, our hydropower is fully allocated to our customers in our firm power contracts. And so we really strive to keep the use of the hydro for BA operations to a minimum. As renewable energy and variable energy resource penetration levels have increased, that's become more and more difficult. We have tried to get outside resources, and we've had a number of different arrangements that have helped. And some of those arrangements have come and gone as entities utilize their resources for their own purposes. Capacity does seem to be getting more and more scarce, and so we do believe that a integrated market like SPP provides a much more sustainable BA operation into the future. Another category is we want to ensure trading capability. Our firm electric service contracts are, like the name implies, firm. And so when our hydropower is not enough for our obligations, we buy to firm that up. And as a buyer, we have to make sure that there are partners out there that we can buy from. And a market really firms that up, really provides a good environment to ensure trading capability. The third category there is just an evolved market environment. It's been well established through both studies and RTO experience that LMP based locational marginal pricing based markets do provide overall efficiency in resource dispatch. In general, buyers of power end up paying lower prices, and sellers of excess power end up receiving higher prices. And so overall, the market environment of integrated marketplace, an organized market, tends to be superior than our current bilateral market arrangements, where we literally, call entities and buy, bilaterally. And so we believe that moving to a more mature market environment is good for the overall footprint. The fourth category there is broader transmission planning. Now, of course, we do transmission planning, and we even do it on a broad basis through WestConnect. But we believe an RTO provides, kind of the next level of planning processes. The SPP environment would provide planning that incorporates market benefits into their cost-benefit analysis of projects, and we think that brings it to the next level and would be superior. So, all these areas, we probably would recommend this even if it cost us as a net cost to make this sort of transition. But fortunately, it does look like this type of a change to the RTO would actually bring a net benefit. And so that makes the recommendation even easier. We've estimated between 2 and 3 million per year benefit, and that's a fairly conservative estimate. And I'll talk about that a little bit more in a bit. Next slide. So one of the big areas that Brent mentioned is that we would transition our WACM BA from Rocky Mountain region operations to SPP. SPP would take over the BA. Now, SPP has the SPP East BA. Due to the two interconnections and the DC ties in the middle, the west side BA would be a separate BA, but SPP would run it. Now, that type of change would result in some very specific things happening. For one, our Rocky Mountain region's BA service agreements would terminate. And there's provisions in there that articulate that. So, we have these agreements are standardized pro forma, and all of our customers within the WACM BA have these agreements, and those would come to a close. Another change would be, well, the WACM BA is a member of the Northwest Power Reserve Sharing Group under Western Power Pool. And that would transition from Rocky Mountain region to SPP because we would no longer be a BA. Therefore, we would no longer have that agreement with the Western Power Pool. Another change that occurs with eliminating our role as a BA would be we would no longer sell ancillary services. And so there's a lot of implications to that. But our provision of BA services would terminate. The last bullet there is interesting. So the Rocky Mountain region operations staff both run the Loveland Control Center for the WACM Balancing Authority, and Rocky Mountain region staff run the Phoenix Control Center for the WALC BA. And those two control centers back each other up. And some of that will not change at all if we proceed in this direction. For example, the switching desk would continue. The Loveland switching desk and the Phoenix switching desk would back each other up, and that would continue as today. But there would be some changes. For example, because we would no longer be a BA, we would not need Phoenix to be the backup to our AGC desk. SPP would, has their own control center and backup control center. And so some of those functions we would be able to phase out. And then there's cost sharing responsibility internal to WAPA that we would need to work through and resolve. However, the WALC BA would still be a BA and would still provide those functions. And so the Loveland Control Center would probably still maintain that backup function. And so none of those changes are, major problems or anything, but they are changes that we would have to work through and implement. Next slide. All right, transmission service provider. So we currently are the transmission service provider, the TSP for LAP transmission service. That would end. That would transition to SPP. SPP would be the TSP. So what that means is that our point-to-point and NITS contract would terminate, and then entities taking transmission service from the LAP transmission system would make those arrangements through SPP agreements. And then, of course, if you're not buying transmission service directly from Rocky Mountain region, you also would not be getting ancillary services from from LAP transmission service provided by RMR. It would all come from SPP. Now, we would still be the transmission owner. And so we would still go through a LAP transmission rate process, but instead of that rate process culminating in a LAP transmission rate that we would charge customers as a TSP, we would have the rate process produce a revenue requirement, and then the revenue requirement would be handed to SPP, and SPP would develop the LAP zonal rate. And through charging service in the LAP zone, as well as a ratio share of like drive out point-to-point service, LAP would, or RMR would recover our revenue requirement by SPP giving that to us. Next slide. Now, we talked a little bit about the financial impact to the LAP project. And I said it was between $2 and $3 million a year. That was our estimate. So these are the different areas that we looked at to try to get a feel for what that would be. The first area is the transmission rate changes. Currently, if somebody takes a certain transmission, it's possible that somebody takes transmission service from LAP and then maybe another entity and maybe even a third entity. Well, in an RTO, if all of those entities join the RTO, you only pay transmission service to the last leg, to the last system in the sync zone. And so those first legs of transmission are considered pancake transmission, and those payments would cease. And so if you're the transmission service provider that is receiving revenue from those from that type of service, that service would end and that revenue would not come in anymore, and thus your rate slightly increases in an RTO. Now, to offset that, on the good side, if you're a transmission customer and you're buying transmission service, then you may have some pancake service that you would no longer have to purchase. And so, a lot of it offsets each other. And LAP would have some pancake service that we would have savings from. So that's the second bullet. The third bullet there are market benefits. As mentioned, we did a Brattle study. We looked at some average hydro conditions as well as low hydro conditions. And LAP's benefit is either 2.4 for average hydro and 3.4 million a year for low hydro conditions. And those estimates were fairly conservative because we held the hydro pretty static as opposed to allowing it to be flexibly bid into the market. So we think it possibly could be higher than that. Now, there's also impacts from BA service changes. As if we were no longer the BA, we would no longer be selling those services. And so we'd lose those revenues. But then on the other side, we would also free up generation that provides those services, and that generation would be of value in the marketplace. Software changes, that's similar. There'd be certain software that we would be able to eliminate. For example, merchant and settlement software related to the WISE market. we would terminate that. But we would have to add new software to take part in the integrated marketplace. So those would be new costs. The SPP admin fee is a big area. Currently, we pay for RC services. We pay SPP for that. And we also pay SPP for WISE admin charges. And those costs would be rolled into an overall RTO admin fee that SPP is designed, and they have 4 different schedules that make up that admin fee. And we've estimated that our costs would probably rise about $1 million a year. That's a real rough estimate, but we think it's in that ballpark. And then, offsetting the admin fee, of course, would be RMR staff changes. There would be certain positions that would, change. And so we believe that through attrition, we'd be able to have some savings there. So taking all that into account and being fairly conservative, we think that there's $2 to $3 million a year benefit at first, because staff changes would take time to transition into. It'd probably be less than that, but over time, it would probably grow possibly to be more than that. Next slide. All right, our firm electric service product, our firm electric service contracts. So this gets right to our core mission. The question is what changes in our power product? And it would be nothing if we didn't have Mount Albert Pump Storage Plant. And case in point in that is when UGP joined SPP back in 2015, they didn't need to revise their power contracts with their customers, and our contracts are very similar. Now, the LAP contracts, though unique among the projects across WAPA, we do have a pump storage plant, and we have very, very specific provisions in those contracts that involve Mount Albert. And in an RTO environment, we believe there's a better way to do it. And so if we proceed with this recommendation and enter into final negotiations with SPP, we would immediately continue framing a proposal to make a modification to that aspect of our LAP contracts. The proposal would involve removing customer scheduling rights, and then have LAP solely control Mount Albert. And then in return, we would pass through the financial benefits of our maximizing the value of Mount Albert in the RTO marketplace, and we pass that through to customers. And so we've already had discussions with our LAP customers through Loveland Area Customer Association, or LACA, meetings. And this summer, if we decide to proceed, we will continue those discussions and hopefully get a very specific plan nailed out in the not so far future. And with that, I believe that's my last slide, and I'll turn it over to our Upper Great Plains region and Steve Sanders.
Thanks, Dave. Good morning, everybody. I'm Steve Sanders. I'm UGP's strategic advisor. On behalf of UGP, I also want to extend our thanks and appreciation for your participation today and during this public process. And I'll be providing a summary of the UGP background and evaluation that's outlined in detail in the FRN recommendation report that's posted on our RTO West website. Next slide, please. So as Lloyd noted earlier, UGP is situated differently than the CRISP and the RMR offices. UGP is already a transmission owner member of the SPP RTO with a limited participation in the West. So what we're evaluating is expanding our participation in the West. We previously completed a public process and an extensive study to evaluate the impacts and risks for UGP and to support our decision to join the SPP RTO in 2015. The limited participation in the RTO in the current time frame in the Western interconnection is that our West generation load are currently not in the SPP integrated marketplace or in SPP's balancing authority area. When we integrated in 2015, the integrated marketplace nor the balancing authority was extended into the west to cover our entire system. However, UGP's east and west transmission facilities are already under the SPP tariff in both the east and the west, as I noted, and those are included in SPP pricing zone 19, the upper Missouri zone, or the UMC as it's called. The East generation and load are already in the integrated market, and that's the majority of our load and generation. I think our west generation is about 10% of our generation, for example. Next slide. So here's a pictorial that shows the portion of our system that UGP is looking at expanding our participation. The hashed area there in the dark red on the west side of the east-west separation is the portion of our system that we're looking at modifying our participation. And those facilities in that hashed area are already under the RTO and in the SPP tariff, as I noted earlier. The yellow area is UGP's current WAUW balancing authority area. And as I noted earlier, we retained that when we joined in 2015. The majority of SPP's or UGP's system on the east is included in the RTO, is in that lighter red area that's shown on the eastern side. Next slide. So given where we're at and our joining SPP in 2015, the changes for UGP would be limited in the RTO West. So on the first bullet there, UGP would place its relatively small amount of West WAUW balancing authority area generation and load directly into the SPP integrated marketplace. And what we would look at initially would be adding UGP's West generation at Fort Peck and Yellowtail into the integrated market. We don't expect any major market impacts, again, because of the relative small amount versus the majority of our system is already in the market. And we don't expect any major seams issues due to the IM expansion in the West. Similar to what Dave noted for the WACM area, UGP would cease its WAUW balancing authority area services, and our balancing authority area would be merged into the SPP BA on the west that would be newly formed as a larger BA there. And similarly, the BAA ancillary services would be provided from the SPP integrated marketplace on the west. We would also withdraw from the SPP Weiss market. We would withdraw from the Western Power Pool Reserve Sharing Group. And other impacts, we don't expect any major new market software tools, additions, or additional staff support. Again, given that we are already in the RTO and the majority of our system is already in the market. So we've already established all of those tools and staffing to support our current participation and membership. And lastly, on the last bullet, we don't expect any major workload changes, again, because we're already there. There could be a potential workload reduction because of the WAUW balancing authority desk change. However, we believe that would provide opportunities for additional support to other UGP functional areas. Next slide. So for UGP, there's several key strategic considerations that we identified as we move down this recommendation to expand our participation. The first would be risk mitigation in a number of areas that we've identified in the recommendation report. A couple I would just mention would be this reduces some of the risk associated with our WAUW balancing authority area, which is relatively small and difficult to respond to, say, renewables that want to add to the system, for example. The other thing is risks of market access on the west. Under the second bullet, transmission market optimization, expanding our participation and the extension of the SPP RTO in the west would allow UGP to complete what it started in 2015, as Lloyd mentioned. And basically, we would have and allow us to put our entire system, both east and west, fully in the RTO structure, including the markets and the balancing authority area of SPP. And that would also include, as the sub bullet shows there, inclusion of the East-West Miles City DC tie in that market dispatch as well. Third bullet, it would improve reliability for us. One big aspect of that is that we would be part of a larger SPP West Side Balancing Authority area, which provides significant reliability benefits. The fourth bullet, we believe we would obtain optimized resource dispatch because of the broader market footprint over on the west, and this would help us with improved rate stability. And then lastly, this recommendation would support the core mission success for UGP, and specifically would allow us to better enable the administration and the customer's clean energy goals by having our system included in a larger balancing authority area. Next slide. In the recommendation report, we've provided cost benefit analysis. This is additive to the analysis we did in 2015. And so I would point out in the first bullet that we did significant analysis and studies that was completed in 2014 that can be referenced relative to UGP. For the RTO West expansion of our participation, as was noted earlier, there was a 2022 Brattle study done by the participants. And for that, there was an estimate of about 124,000 per year for average hydro conditions, up to 316,000 per year for low hydro conditions for UGP in our balancing authority area. And for UGP, that market savings was primarily driven by projected lower cost purchases. The other west side impacts primarily were already included in our analysis when we joined the RTO in 2015. However, you'll note in the recommendation report, we evaluated incremental impacts for the RTO West participation here. Specifically, we looked at transmission revenue impacts, RTO administration cost impacts, human resource costs, termination of our WAUW balancing authority area services, implementation and software tools and costs associated with those, capacity benefit impacts, and the federal service exemption. And as we noted in our recommendation report, all of those various increments, we conservatively netted to zero. And so those weren't key drivers from a financial perspective. So considering all those costs and benefits together, UGP estimates a net benefit of about 100,000 to 300,000 a year. Again, for us, we've got a relative small portion of our system that is in the west that would be added to the west side market relative to our overall footprint. So that's reflective in that impact in some respects. And the last bullet, wanted to note that for UGP, based on where we're at and our joining in 2015 and our desire to complete the full integration in UGP, that this benefit cost is not the primary driver for UGP. I think, as a note in the sub bullet there, we want to prevent negative impacts for our existing RTO membership as one of the key elements. We want to increase reliability. And thirdly, although not noted there, is this will help us meet a number of those strategic goals that I mentioned earlier. Next slide. Some of the key risks for UGP of not expanding our RTO participation or not proceeding with this recommendation. Listed 4 here. This is status quo of our current operations in the RTO versus the expanded participation. The first would be impacts to the existing RTO membership. If our UGP West facilities, which would include our load and generation, are not integrated into an expanded SPP integrated marketplace, we believe there's significant challenges to retaining our West facilities in the existing SPP RTO membership. And that's a significant concern and a risk that UGP would be forced to bifurcate its East and West systems, which is something we would not want to do. The second item there is future viability of UGP's West Side Balancing Authority area. As I've noted, it's fairly small, so we have concerns similar to what Dave noted earlier in the RMR area, that do we have a BA balancing authority area that's sustainable, reliable, and There's capacity requirements and other financial impacts that are in question. And I think one of the key elements there is that we have limited or no ability to accommodate higher level of renewables in our standalone balancing authority area. The third one, uncertainty of UGP rate impacts. We believe that rate impacts are unknown with these yet undefined other market options, whereas they're fairly clear, we believe, with the RTO expansion option. And then lastly, loss of capacity benefits. There would be a reduction in the existing WAUW balancing authority area capacity requirements that would not be realized if UGP doesn't participate in the expanded RTO and transition its balancing authority into the larger SPP balancing authority area. Next slide. Throughout this process, I think as Brent and Rodney had noted, we've reached out to customers and neighbors, and historically, UGP's customers overwhelmingly supported its recommendation to join the SPP RTO in 2015. I think we've gotten consistent feedback in this effort, and I believe we have the support from our customers to participate in the RTO West, and we've not received any negative feedback or concerns to date. And we have discussed potential seams issues with our neighbors, and that would be something that we would address as we move forward if the recommendation is to move forward. We have actively communicated and sought feedback from customers and other potential impacted parties, including outreach to the Native American tribes, presentations to the Midwest Electric Consumers Association, regular updates to our current SPP transmission owners and customers in our UGP shared Upper Missouri zone. And then lastly, the directly impacted UGP customers in the West, for example, Basin Electric, that are also actively participating in the RTO West, we believe are strongly supportive of this effort to move forward. Next slide. So in summary, the UGP estimates of a net benefit of the RTO West expanding our participation is in the range of about 100 to 300,000. Again, not a large amount, again, given our small footprint there. The benefit and costs are not a primary driver for UGP, as I noted earlier. The second bullet, UGP's risks are significantly reduced compared to its status quo, and its strategic goals and needs are better accomplished and met within the expanded RTO and the Western interconnection. So this is a key driver. And then the last bullet, UGP's primary concern and a key concern of our customers is to not impact UGP's current membership in the SPP RTO. We believe that expanding UGP's participation through RTO West would eliminate that risk for UGP and would also allow us to complete the full integration of our system into the RTO, which we started in 2015. And with that, I appreciate your time, and I'll turn it over to Crystalline.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Steve. And thank you again to all of our presenters today. I think we've got a great overview and background information and really highlighted some thoughtful consideration that has brought us to today's recommendation, which again is summarized in the first bullet of our screen there. Again, this recommendation to pursue final negotiations is really rooted in 5 primary strategic considerations that we've discussed throughout today, and that really ensures we're remaining aligned with WAPA's mission and values. Those primary strategic considerations are that it allows WAPA to mitigate risks associated with a number of areas, including reduced depth of trading, missed opportunities to increase regional efficiencies, growing resource adequacy concerns, and the risks of continued reliable operations associated with drought and other weather events. Those are just to name a few of the risks that we believe this recommendation would help mitigate. It also allows us to maximize the use of our existing transmission system and support ongoing reliability, including optimizing the use of those DC ties, as well as the added benefits that those would bring to the Eastern and the Western interconnection. It also enables us a broader and more sustainable BA structure that can address many reliability concerns associated with operations into the future, while also aligning with our DOE administration's priorities to integrate additional renewable resources to the system. And most importantly, this recommendation supports WAPA in reliably and cost-effectively adapting to a changing electric industry. It allows us to continue to meet our mission, our vision, and our commitment to our customers. So to end us out on the next slide, I want to just take a quick look here on your screen is SPP has provided a high-level preliminary RTOS implementation timeline. We should note that a lot of work has gone into this initial process to create a framework that has brought us to today in those terms and conditions that are acceptable to WAPA and the other RTOS participants. At the close of WAPA's public comment period, of course, we will consider all recommendations. They will be carefully considered before we make a final decision about CRISP, Rocky Mount, and UGP's expansion. In parallel, the other participating entities are also going through their own internal processes to determine whether or not they would proceed with final negotiations. Should the participants decide to continue, each entity will execute a financially binding commitment agreement. This is not a membership agreement. This agreement would just reimburse SPP for any development costs incurred in the event the RTO West does not ultimately go live. If WAPA was to execute a commitment agreement, an SPP tariff filing would be made in early 2024, and a go live would be anticipated in April of 2026. So again, that's just a high-level overview of how we've gotten to where we are today and any potential steps should the recommendation be to move forward. Again, I want to thank all of our presenters today and thank all of you, all of our customers and stakeholders for being here. What I'm going to do next is pass the mic over to Claire Douthit for some additional details on submitting formal comments and the start of our Q&A process. Claire?
Yes, can we go to the next slide, please? Again, I'm Claire Douthit, the attorney advisor for WAPA, and I'm the moderator. To submit formal comments, they must be submitted in writing and received by June 12th to ensure consideration in WAPA's decision process, and should include name and general description of the entity submitting the comment, name, telephone number, and email address of the entity's primary contact, identification of any specific element of the recommendation the comment references. Please send written comments to either of the following: via email spp-comments@wapa.gov or via regular mail to Rebecca Johnson, Transmission and Power Markets Advisor, Western Area Power Administration, 12155 West Alameda Parkway, Lakewood, Colorado, 80228, 8213. And as I mentioned at the beginning, this information meeting has been recorded and we will will be posted within 2 days. We're going to take a break. I understand there have been some technical difficulties, and so we are going to take 10 minutes while trying to address those technical difficulties, and then while still being respectful of everybody's time. And then we'll come in and do a question and answer session and provide the instructions regarding how to submit questions. So we will reconvene at 10:28. Thank you.